Alright guys, so this is a video I've wanted to do for a while now, but I haven't, just because for whatever reason I've had a lot of anxiety about doing this, which is kind of weird considering everything, but I think it's just, I have a lot to say, and I worry that perhaps I'm not going to be able to get it all out as eloquently as I state it in my mind. So it's just one of those things, like, I haven't wanted to do it because I know me talking here, it's just not going to come out as good as it is in my head, but I'm going to do the best I can here. And what I want to talk about is sort of this, I don't even know if it's a debate, but within the retro computing world or hobby, just using real hardware and using emulators like DOSBox or PCEM or even like clone cards and things like that. And I just want to put this right up front. This is my own personal reasons. It's very personal. It's not necessarily like logical or, you know, based on emotion and passion, which I think is okay when we're just dealing with a fun hobby. So what this isn't, I hesitate calling it a video because it's more like just me talking. I think someone once in my comments called these kind of quote-unquote videos talking head videos. But anyways, we'll call it, for simplicity, I'm going to call it a video. But what this video, first of all, isn't is a response video. I'm not responding to anyone's videos. There's been a couple videos recently, you know, talking about debating real hardware and, you know, emulation. Now, admittedly, I haven't watched any of those, but this is not a response video. Secondly, this is not a is one way better than the other. I'm not going to try to make the point here, is DOSBox or emulation the better way to go for real hardware, or is real hardware the better way to go? This isn't about that. This is my personal reason. So please try to keep that in mind. Personal reasons. That being said, you don't need to comment in the comments about the betterments or, you know, why one is superior to the other. I understand a lot of the benefits, especially as far as cost goes. Obviously, using something like DOSBox is a lot more cost efficient. All you need is your modern computer. You don't have to go buy a bunch of like old hardware that's overpriced. It's also far more space efficient. You don't have to have a room set up like I do with a bunch of, you know, beige, giant, heavy beige computers and CRT monitors. So please keep in mind, I am aware of these things. That's not what I'm talking about. This is strictly about my personal journey here. So before I get into personally why I just love using original hardware, or at least the best way I can explain it, I want to touch on 2 points. The first point is, you don't need to have a reason. If you're into whatever it is, vintage cars or like old computers or things like that, and someone's like, hey, why don't you just emulate it all? It'll be cheaper. You don't have to dedicate blah, blah, blah. You don't need a reason. I know you don't need a reason. You just do something because you like doing it. As long as you're not, you know, hurting anyone or anything like that, it's okay. So, you know, what's the old Marge Simpson meme or whatever? I just do it because it's neat. I think that's perfectly valid. But, you know, sometimes, you know, there are reasons. Sometimes you still want to explain something the best you can of why you're into something. So, first off, you don't really need a reason to want to do something. Nor, like, I do not need a reason. Maybe I just like tinkering, or I just like to. So, that's one thing. Let's get that out of the way. Reason 2, there is, or at least there was, a very good reason in the past to use hardware over emulation, especially like early 2000s when I started seriously getting into the, you know, retro computing kind of hobby, and that was compatibility. So in the early days, DOSBox and things like that have a lot of issues, especially with things like sound cards, and it just wasn't up to snuff, really. It was usually much harder. I remember one of my first experiences, I was having a really hard game, DOS game. I think it was Arena, Elder Scrolls Arena. It just would not run right in DOSBox. And you would think on a real computer, having to mess with like setting up the memory right and all that, it would be really hard. But like just like bang, I got it running on one of my early like real setups quick, and I was like, man, this is great. Like the emulation's garbage. It's like real hardware is the way to go. It's a little more costly and space intensive, but you get much better results. And for a while, compatibility was a good reason to go with real hardware. But lately, things like DOSBox and stuff, especially with like sound card support and stuff, it has gotten much better to the point that I think it's still valid to make an argument about real hardware having a compatibility edge, but it is not the argument it used to be. I feel like emulation has gotten much, much better on that front. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. Now, let's talk about why I will pretty much always choose real hardware with an exception I'm going to talk about for a minute. Actually, let's talk about the exception now. First of all, these are, like, we'll make a Johnny Depp Pirates reference here. This is more like guidelines for myself, not rules. There are always going to be exceptions, and there's going to be time that I just want to use something more modern. But generally, I like to use period-correct real hardware. The big exception would probably be data, like getting data to the old computer and keeping it there. So we're talking about floppy drives and hard drives and things like that, where I will make compromises. I will use floppy emulators. I will use compact flash cards. It's just I can't risk 100 hours of wizardry to a 40-year-old MFM drive that might have been unreliable when it was new-ish. So, as much as I would love to use 100% real hardware all the time, I'm okay with certain compromises certain times. Again, especially when this comes to like hard drives. I haven't really had to use many floppy emulators, at least on the PC side of things, because, you know, floppy drives I find are still relatively abundant and somewhat reliable, and I can still make like write floppy images on my newer computer and use them on old things. So that hasn't been so much an issue yet. I will state I despise the look of them in a retro machine. I believe it destroys the aesthetics. But I'm more okay with it if it's like out of sight, like as an external drive or something like that. But I hate when people put the emulators like in their beige boxes. I know it's not really, it might not be avoidable. I may have to do that at some point in the far future. I hope not, but I think it looks hideous and it destroys the aesthetics, and I hate it. It goes for like when they put them in Amigas and stuff too. It's gross. So I suppose we should throw in memory or RAM as well as something that's it doesn't really, I don't lose sleep over replacing RAM or using like RAM expansions and stuff like that. Not really a thing on like PC compatibles. Usually you just pull out the little dip chip or the DIM or the SIM and you just replace it. It's not a big deal. But say my Amiga, I had a period correct RAM like Zorro card, and you put different like SIMs or DIMs in it, memory, up to 8 megabytes, and I was just having so many issues with it, and just it's a little picky about memory that it would take, and it wasn't very reliable. I was getting a lot of memory efforts, and I just replaced that with a modern solution. It was a Zorro card that had like 2 or 3 chips soldered onto it. Works fine. Had a little jumper to pick the memory amount. Very much more reliable. I didn't have any issue with that. It didn't bother me doing that. So I guess that's another thing that I don't really. It doesn't really matter. But again, these are like guidelines. I think it's different for like a self-proclaimed hardware purist. I think what you're going to accept and what's okay with you is different for everyone. It's definitely an art and not a science, and you put your own limitations. So I kind of hate the phrase like there's no wrong way to do it. I'm a person, I usually kind of like strict definitions. I usually like if there's an orthodoxy way to do something. It's just me. But I think in this case, definitely, there's not really a wrong way to do it. Some people, it might be a certain percentage of old to new parts. If you go above that percentage of new parts, maybe it starts to bother you, you don't like it or something. I just feel like once you start changing certain things, you may as well just use DOSBox, because you've quintessentially changed the essence of that machine anyway. So, but I guess you'd figure like what is the essence of a vintage computer, and it's probably different for different people. For me, if I had to philosophize here and talk about what makes up the soul or the essence of a vintage computer, I guess I would say like the motherboard, chipset, we can count that as one thing, and then video capabilities, sound capabilities, and the CPU. And I think I personally don't like changing those or making those things too modern in an older computer, because I think then it just fundamentally changes what that machine is, and you just may as well emulate. You just may as well use DOSBox on a modern computer at that point. And yeah, I'm perfectly aware it can be quite subjective, and I'm sure if you went back and watched through my videos, you would find some contradictions and some hypocrisies perhaps. But it's a very subjective thing. So when I talk about pure hardware stuff, I'm usually talking about like the CPU, the sound cards, the video cards, that kind of stuff. I don't like to stray too far from, and like I'll use accelerators and things like that, but I don't like to stray too far from the real hardware. If it takes a Motorola 68K CPU, I don't mind upgrading that to another 68K, or even putting in a accelerator to PowerPC, something like that. I just don't like throwing in like something crazy like a modern like I don't remember the FPMU or whatever, those things that actually like emulate older CPUs. That's where it kind of crosses the line for me. I'm not really into that. I'm not even into clone cards, like those things like the Orpheus, or things like our software solutions like SoftMPU and stuff. I'm not even into that stuff. It's not the same. I guess I should get into why I'll always choose real hardware when I can. And I have to say, for me, it's the journey, not the destination. And that's probably the best way, personally, I can put it for myself. Hey, if you just want to play an old DOS game, if you just want to play, I don't know, Monkey Island, or you want to play, I don't know, any of those old DOS games, or even Windows 9X games, stuff like that. If that's your only concern, use an emulator, use DOSBox. It's easy. But for me, it's about the journey. It is not just playing the game. Playing the game is part of it, but I feel like going through the journey, when you get to the destination, it's so much more fulfilling. For me, it just feels like hitting the button and playing the game in DOSBox is just an empty, disposable, boring experience. Even if the game's great, for me, I can still enjoy it. I can still play a game in DOSBox and enjoy the game. But it just feels like a shadow of what it could be to me. As weird as that sounds, it's probably one of those things that, like, if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. But like I said, for me, it's the journey. It's finding these old parts that are usually these days overpriced, but finding them at a yard sale or even on eBay for a good deal, and the excitement of that is part of it. It's the tinkering. It's the love of putting this actually together. And making it all work. It's reviving these things from 30 or 40 years ago and giving them purpose and having them run again. And it's actually all those trials and tribulations. Even you spend days, and it can be really frustrating sometimes getting all this stuff to work. And then when it does work and you get it working, and then you play the game on it, the experience just feels a lot more. It's just more fulfilling. Like it's just sitting and playing the game on DOSBox just feels boring and hollow and disposable to me. Again, probably not everybody. Some people love it. It's fine. For me, it's just a lesser sort of experience. So the building the machine and running it on one of those big beige boxes is just better for me. It's just more fulfilling. I appreciate the experience far more than if I would have just fired it up on DOSBox. And it's even the same, like I said, with like even those clone cards and stuff, it just takes something away from it. So, there's like, I don't remember, so I want to say it's called the Orpheus or something, where it's like a Gravis ultrasound and a sound, it's like an amazing sound card that we didn't have anything like it back in the 90s and stuff. And I mean, it's cool and all, but it just doesn't appeal to me. It feels as exciting and cool as the concept is, it just still feels boring to me, because it's just, I don't know. It's like if I can, I don't know. It's hard to explain it, but I'm just not into that stuff. It reminds me of this episode of I used to have this job. We had the TV on, and the client, he liked to watch that car show, like Counting Cars or something. And I remember they were like building a classic car, and the worker was like, "Hey, we can make these, we can refabricate these parts instead of spending ridiculous amounts of money and getting these like old parts from like 50 or 60 years ago. Like, hey, we can." I don't know if they were like 3D printing at the time, but we could get these cheap remanufactured. They look exactly the same, and the guy was just like, "No." I was like, I get it. I get that now. I get that feeling. So again, it's not always practical or logical or cost effective, but it's just I just have no interest in it. So since we're talking about clone cards, and if by some weird off chance one of the people involved with like the Orpheus and the Orpheus 2 card listens to this, don't be offended, because I'm not poo-pooing your product. It's great. It's not for me. It's pretty cool, but it's just not for me. But I guess we should talk about clone cards, because they occupy a weird space in my philosophy on all this. They're kind of in between complete emulation, like DOSBox or things like that I really won't touch unless special circumstances, special occasions, and like pure vintage hardware. They occupy this weird middle ground. And I bring up the Orpheus because it's the one thing that comes to mind. And I'm not really interested in that because it's not something that existed at the time. I'm pretty sure it uses real hardware, because I know people are harvesting like Interwave chips for the Gravis part and things like that, but it's a weird Frankenstein card of different things, and it's just, I don't know, it's just something I'm not interested in, where something like an Adlib clone, or maybe even the Adlib Gold I'm not sure about that, but the cards are like one-to-one replicas or replacements for things are more palatable to me. Obviously, they lose that sort of provenance of being like 30 years old and you have them running again and there's a history with them. Obviously, they kind of lose that, so I don't like them as much. I'll still always go with like actual vintage hardware. But the stuff, like I said, like the Adlib cards, which are basically just exactly what the old Adlib cards were, but, more reliable parts, maybe the board's cleaned up a little bit. Maybe any bugs are removed, and the sound to noise ratio is a little bit better. I don't necessarily have a problem with those kind of things. They're like exact replicas, or mostly exact, but I still sort of avoid them. Just because. Not like I probably wouldn't go out of my way to acquire an Adlib Gold recreation, even if it is sort of like a one-to-one using the same parts on it. I don't know. I guess if one fell into my lap or if some special project popped into my head, but I probably wouldn't be willing to pay much for it. I don't know. It's useful. I've done stuff like that before. I've bought certain clone cards, but they don't really hit me in the feels the way that original hardware does. But of course, cost and availability, of course, I take that into consideration. So. It's the same. Like, you think I love lugging around these like 60-pound CRT monitors, but they take up so much space. They're so heavy, but it's just the feeling of sitting in front of one and playing these old games as opposed to like a LCD. It's just, I don't know. It's like for a Friday night or a Saturday night, I can sit down in front of this Tandy 1000 I decked out and put together, and an old CGA monitor, and I can hear the floppy disk reading and stuff, and just for a little bit, for a few hours, I could be 10 again. I can go out to my old Amiga 2000 and with the CRT monitor and start playing a game, and I'm 14 again at my dad's. And I don't know, that's part of the experience for me, the sights and the sounds and stuff. And I wouldn't even get that necessarily from a quote unquote sleeper build. I could throw some newer hardware into a beige box, and I may do something like that as a fun project. I was thinking about doing something like that for old like retro Steam games to give me the illusion there, but I don't really have much of a choice in that case. But let's say I just wanted to do it for old DOS games, it just wouldn't be the same. Not only the sounds would be the same, but like I would know, like I didn't put that thing together. It's not. I know it's not like cool old hardware, and that just wouldn't hit the same. So yeah, like I said, it's a little philosophical. It's just the world I grew up in is is gone. I know that. And just putting together these old computers and actually running them, it kind of revives a fragment of that world I grew up in for a while. And it's just part of the enjoyment of it. It just firing up a game on DOSBox feels so disposable to me, and there's so many disposable experiences in this world these days. Even, it's sad, like physical media, like I guess Walmart and stuff like that, or they said they're going to stop carrying physical media. I mean, think about games, but I'm sure that translates to like Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff as well. I don't know, that's very sad for many reasons. There's several reasons. But even on the level of, it's weird. I found that like streaming a movie, I mean, unless we're all sitting at the couch at night and there's a pizza and it's like a movie night thing. But just like randomly you come across a movie and you start streaming it, it's so much easier to just, and then you stop it and you get up from it. And it's so weird. Just the simple act of going over the shelf, picking out a DVD or a Blu-ray, or a laser disc in my case, or a VHS, and pulling it out, putting it in the player, sitting back down and hitting start. Just that simple extra process almost like invests you so much more. Like if I pulled a movie out on the laser disc and I started watching it, and even if I was like, nah, I would be much more likely to actually follow through with the entire experience. And maybe it would be a waste of time, or maybe I would have found out, man, I really love this movie near the end of it. But like, I'd be so much more likely to actually finish the movie just because of the simple experience of getting up, getting the disc, putting it in the player, hitting play, rather than hitting just play on a streaming service, which I'd be far more likely to just at some point, if I didn't like it, just and turn it off. I don't know. There's just something about that whole experience that like the emulation will never ever replace for me. Yeah, it's just things. I don't know, the stuff like DOSBox and LCD, like replacements for CRT monitors and stuff like it, just never will replace the experience for me. And there's necessary, like I said, there's necessary evils, not that they're evils, but compact flash cards, SD, certain things like that. And I'm not above, like, I'll use weird things sometimes, especially for convenience, but if I didn't really have to, I wouldn't. So I only do it usually when I have to, but I think that's all I really wanted to say. Again, you can disagree or agree. Just, add your comments in the comment section. Let me know what you think. If you've listened to the whole thing through this far, thanks, I guess, for listening to my rambling. So it's just something I wanted to get out there as my own personal view on this subject, and why I personally will pretty much always use real hardware over emulation or clones, or even those boards that I know they do this with the Amiga a lot these days. They'll like take dead boards and they'll find the chips that work, and then they'll plant them on a new motherboard that's usually some wacky color like purple or something. That's just like, give me a real machine from 1990 that's probably not working. I don't know. Anyways, thanks again for watching. We'll have a real video next time, and thanks again. Let me know what your opinion is on the subject down in the comments. Thanks.